Okay, so we'll get started. Okay.
Yep, let's do it.
64 or 3?
Hold on, I gotta get my notes file back open. This is
63.
Yes, 63.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so turned out that David was a big fan of Japanese cinema and coincidentally went to the same university as me. So we got on like a bag of bricks. Well, that's a really wrong metaphor there. Like a ton of bricks?
A bag of bricks. A bag of bricks.
Bag of bricks.
That's the first time I've ever heard that, but I will be using it.
That's going to be our intro. That was not on purpose.
On.
We got along like a sailing fire.
Like a house on fire?
Like
it would be the standard one.
Yeah,
bag of bricks, never heard it.
House on fire is pretty negative anyway. Anyway, we got along.
It's in the lexicon now. Okay, welcome to Tokyo Jazz Joints, episode 63 of the podcast, our year-end podcast. James, how are you?
Doing really well, considering it's been quite a long year. Lots of stuff going on, a lot of work, a little bit tired, but that was a bit of a slow intro there, Philip. Sounds like maybe you've been already hitting the festivities there in Ireland. Early start? Early start to the Christmas
I was actually thinking,
crake.
I was actually thinking the same as I sort of said it. I feel like it was like everything slowed down, like one of those films, where it's like a slow motion action scene. I think what it is, what it is? I was just thinking before we came on, actually, I feel like this feels a bit like, at the end of term in school when all the exams and kind of all the work's over and you're just messing about waiting for the run into the holidays. That's what it feels a bit like. We've no real notes. We've no things that we need to cover. So if you're listening, just prepare yourself. This is probably the closest to a free jazz version of the podcast that we're going to get. We've got a very loose structure.
It's the closest to what it would really be like to drink with us and talk over a couple beers in a jazz bar. Just a lot of old shite, as people would say. But yeah,
that's it.
Things are good here. A little bit of news to get to later on, but let's not bury the lead, Philip. Let's start out with the good stuff. I believe you have got some exciting book news.
I don't know if that's what we discussed, but I mean, in the spirit of the free jazz thing, I'll just go with it and I'll just respond to that. Well, I mean, I think if you're listening the day that the podcast has gone out, it's the 19th of December, 2023, which means it's exactly 1 year since we launched the Kickstarter, I was going to say the incredibly successful Kickstarter fundraising campaign for the Tokyo Jazz Joints book, and it was incredibly successful. But let me tell you, James, when I launched the campaign this time last year, I had obviously done a lot of prep and had some advice, and it was all ready to go. And then you literally click the button and you launch the campaign, and I went into the shower and I was just came out and I looked at the thing and I was like, you see, this is the problem. No one's going to contribute. This is going to be an absolute disaster. And Judy said to me, well, look, it has only been in fairness, 20 minutes since you launched it. And then really from that point on, I think my good friend Michael was a good old school friend, and he was the first person to contribute. And I think from there on, it just kind of snowballed. And as you know yourself, I think it was the 23rd of December, we did like a little Instagram live, or maybe it was Christmas Eve. But I mean, within about 5 days, we'd already hit 100%. So I think it really, it blew us away as much as anyone, right?
Yeah, I mean, we had talked about, our expectations of, okay, we think we can make it to this target, might be a little bit close, maybe we'll have to top it up ourselves with a few bucks at the end. And then as we started getting it, it was like, wow, okay, this is a good start. But I remember you telling me, and then some of the stuff I'd read online about these kinds of fundraising campaigns is you get a real big burst at the beginning with the excitement and people who are already in touch and really be ready to support. And then you've got the lull, and that's when you go like, oh my God, we're not going to make it. And then the last couple days is another big burst as you put out announcements, 48 hours left, help us get there. But we were actually making little bets and guesses about, okay, once we saw some support come in, how many days will it take? Will it take 17? Will it be 15? When's it going to stop? And it was just shocking to think that there were so many people out there listening to the podcast and willing to support us. I mean, I'm still kind of shocked a year later, Philip. It is amazing because, after getting all of that financial support, but think of all of this, the kind words and like sort of encouragement we've gotten throughout this whole process, from the beginning of raising the money to getting it printed to starting to send it out, and then all the people sending in their photos and reviews. I mean, it's just been, honestly, it's been beyond my wildest dreams to see all of this love for Jazz Kisaten. So yes, a big pat on the back to both of us.
I think you said Jazz Kisaten there. I have to go back and edit that one. Don't upset any listeners. I mean,
very deep cut there. Very deep cut. Yes.
I think with all Kickstarter campaigns, my understanding, at least from watching some interviews and things with other people in preparation, there is that dip and you think, oh, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I think what shocked us and shocked me certainly was, the speed of it. And I know that when I chatted with some of the Kickstarter people, they said, look, put an extra few days on because of the holiday period. And it's funny because in the end, like it felt almost like it was dragging a little bit because you thought, like this just feels almost a bit too long. But I mean, I think it was 601 backers, I think, in the end, and it was 60,000 euros. So my sense of symmetry was very satisfied by that final figure. But I mean, the thing about it is, as we said before on the podcast, I mean, it seems like so much money, and of course it is, and it allowed me to make certain choices with the slipcase, for example, and the backing of the book, and just certain things that that perhaps would have been beyond budget without that support. But also, so much of it goes on postage and packaging and all these things, and there's not very much of it left over. But I think what was fantastic for us was to smash the target was that like there was a little bit of wiggle room there in terms of, okay, this cover can be made and this thing. And, I think for me, one of the most satisfying things about the book has been that slipcase, that little nod to the Obi, the little nod to record sleeves and things like that. And I'm so happy that, in the second edition, that's remained on there and that's stayed on there, albeit, we have a slightly different, cover color on the cover. And like, again, I mean, it's not even been a year since we launched the Kickstarter, and that's the other mad thing. I mean, to think that the second edition is now, as I speak, it's in UK and EU shops, and it's already in the warehouse, it's in the shops, and it's going to be in the States early January. The warehouses are going to be stocked there as well. So wow, like it's just been a total roller coaster, to think, even going to Heidelberg to see it being printed feels like a very long time ago, but it was actually only back in, I think, around April time, so. Oh, was it? I mean, what a mad year. What a year. Yeah.
That is really, it is really weird that just time catches up on you. But I was thinking about, that number, the people who contributed and supported us, but also like just the range of countries as well. That kind of blew me away because I kind of assumed it would be like, okay, we'll have like a lot of people who maybe we know personally in our networks. So there's going to be a lot of people in Ireland and Great Britain and in the US. But I mean, there were people all around the world who had been listening to the podcast without maybe getting in touch with us and then decided to support, and I think that's really tied in. We've talked about this a lot, Philip, over the last several episodes at least, but I think it really ties into this kind of boom in listening bar culture and this interest in Japanese jazz, kisa, and of course the fantastic boom in tourists of people coming to Japan to see these places for themselves. The timing couldn't have aligned up better, really.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that 3 or 4 days of shipping out all the books, I think it was probably somewhere in the region of 550 books, from the living room. And it's sort of a flurry and just like a blur of labels and names and addresses and levels and all that sort of stuff. But as you're doing that, as you're sticking on these labels, you're like Argentina, Taiwan, Australia,
Yeah.
Poland, and just this range of countries, like right across the world. I think it's in like over 55 countries now, which is incredible. And I think also it could be in more, but sometimes it's trickier with distribution, especially places like Australia, New Zealand, Brazil. We've had a couple of requests there to get books down Sao Paulo.
Yeah.
And it's harder to get them there, because I suppose it's a photography book and they don't necessarily have that level of distribution that you might get with even things like novels and that. But anyway, we're doing our best to get it to the people who want it. And as I said, like the second edition's now out. The Care Verlag, who've been amazing throughout, increased the print run to 4,000. So there's more copies available there. And, if people keep buying them, we hopefully then will be talking about a third edition at some point in the near future.
What's really cool also is I think I mentioned on the last episode or 2 episodes ago when I was in California and just randomly the record store guy, he knew about the project. He didn't have a copy of the book, but I'm starting to get more and more stories like this. So a good friend of the show and well-known DJ here in Japan, Shuya Okino, he was very kind to put out a nice Japanese language message about the book for us here. And then he texted me privately and he said, hey, he was in Paris and he was, having drinks with a French DJ friend of his. And just out of the blue, this French DJ goes, oh, by the way, Okino-san, there's this really cool looking book I saw of all these old jazz kisaten. You ever heard of it? And I was like, so getting those kinds of like stories is I'm really actually excited if I ever do get on a plane again to travel, is just to pop into some of the jazz bars around Asia. And, if I can bring some copies from here or just sort of promote it and just sort of keep spreading it around because, as you know, I mean, there's jazz joints, not just in all the places that you would expect in France or Italy or the States, but I mean, I remember the only time I ever got to visit Vietnam, I went to the only live jazz bar in Hanoi, and I met the owner, who was a well-known sax player. And so we're communicating in a little bit of English. When I tell him I live in Japan, the first thing he says is, Japan? Oh, so Doug Cafe, Shinjuku. I was like, yes, I do. And he was like, oh, yes, many great players played there. I love Japanese jazz, too. I really want to go there. And this guy knew about Doug, man. He'd never been in Japan before, And it was just sort of like, okay, this world is so much more connected than all those many years ago when I first started going to the Kisa and was so excited. It was like, okay, this is this real underground culture, and it's so amazing, and I'm going to like make a website and try to promote it. But actually, people already did know about it. It's a niche interest, but now we're seeing that niche interest grow into something so much better. And so, with the second edition of the book, I'm hoping that we can, get it even spread out even more. I mean, surely there's a jazz bar somewhere down at the those workstations in Antarctica. I mean, people need to, have music and drinks down there if they're stuck there for 6 months.
I mean,
right? So
if you want to go niche, that's niche. But I mean, talking of niche, actually, and talking to jazz clubs, Scott's Jazz Club in Belfast. I was there last week photographing, and I got chatting to Richard, who's one of the guys that does all this amazing work with sound and lights, spends all day Friday getting it set up for the gigs on a Friday night, and then takes it all down again the same night or on the Saturday morning. And, he said he was over in Edinburgh a few weeks ago, and a friend of him said, oh yeah, I listened to this really cool podcast. It's called Tokyo Jazz Joints. and Richard was like, well, it's funny you should mention that, which I think just proves really there is quite literally an audience for absolutely anything, right? Because if someone's wandering around the beautiful city of Edinburgh listening to this drivel, fair play. Yeah. But listen, just going back to the book, I mean, I think one of the other amazing things has been is the coverage it's had. We've been in the Guardian, we've been in BBC Radio 2 on the Jamie Cullum show. It's been on German national radio, it's been in French national media, it's been a lot of places online. We got a mention in Downbeat magazine as well. And I think, that's been really amazing. And I've been lucky enough to have the chance to go to a few different launch and signing events, done some in Belfast, in Dublin, in Amsterdam, been to some of the book fairs and stuff. And what's been really interesting is when you're talking about the project and when you're sort of explaining what it is, and actually someone I think someone challenged me at one point somewhere, I think it was in Belfast actually, because someone said to me, look, you say that these places are disappearing, But then you're also talking here, because in the sort of presentation that I did in Belfast Exposed Gallery in Belfast, I talked also about like the future, and my argument was, well, look, overall the trajectory of this culture is in downward decline. However, there are some bright spots, like, for example, Pithecanthropus erectus that we've talked about so many times, where the owner was a younger man customer who took it over, but also these new places opening up, and he said, well, how can it be both? And I think like we've seen, and it's nothing to do with us, but we've seen certainly, I think, as this interest increases, and this is quite often the phenomenon, right? As internationally, globally, the interest in jazz kissa increases, there's this kind of blowback effect, possibly in Japan. And what we've seen, I think, over the last couple of years, much more than maybe when we started the project, was this development of new places. We mentioned in a previous episode about Tonlist, and I know you've been to a couple of newer places more recently, right? So
yeah, definitely.
What were they?
What's really interesting is that I think that the person who spoke to you at the event is correct, because maybe the whole story hasn't come out. I mean, if you compare just the sheer number of joints, to 30, 40 years ago, obviously there are way, way less, and there's a lot of closures. But this sort of new wave of place, like, we talked about Tonlist, or it's not new anymore, but Romperchichi and Nakano, which is now, I think, more than 10 years old. They are adapting. So I was walking through down past Downbeat, actually, in Yokohama. And there was an old place called the Ad Lib. It was a jazz club, technically, because there was live music, there every day, but it's really just bar size. Philip, remember when you walk into one of these places and it's just like immediately you're like, wow, he has never thrown a single thing out since the day he opened the bar. Okay.
Yep.
Ad Lib was like that. So people were sitting at tables that were still just like piled with old jazz magazines and ashtrays and whatnot. I didn't really go there often because it was a very local jazz club with a lot of vocals, which is not my thing. You would have loved it. But anyway, one day I happened to walk by and there was a new awning outside, and it was the incredible sign with just this plain white font that said, "Listen." And I was like, okay. I'm listening. There's no music. That clearly is going to be some type of music bar. But it wasn't open yet. I finally got to go down there, and again, this world is all connected. It's a young guy, Yamanaka-san, I think is his name, and he used to work not only in bar music in Shibuya, but he also used to work at the old Chigusa in Noge in Yokohama, the oldest jazz kissa in Japan, opened in 1933. So he sort of, now was able to get the money together. He had talked to the owner at Ad Lib who wanted to retire, et cetera, et cetera. So he cleaned the place out, brought in his own sound system, and now he's opened up his own little bar. Now, he didn't say that it was strictly a jazz bar, but everything he played when I was there was jazz. So I think it might have been...
I'm getting flashbacks to Clifford.
Yeah.
Let's not open that can of worms again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he did play, one record, which was a little ambient-y. But looking at his collection, there's certainly a lot of jazz in there. But you could tell it was sort of like, okay, he's going to keep, and the place was like so spick and span clean. It didn't even look like the same space. I mean, it was sleek,
That's interesting, because I know that we had talked about, I think like we had Ad Lib, or we have Ad Lib on the list, I think, but I think when we had been in Yokohama, we had gone obviously for other places that were perhaps more pressing, or certainly at the time felt more pressing, like Minton House, for example, and Downbeat. But I know that we'd kind of sideswiped it slightly because, for that very reason, right, that it was more of a live joint, right? Rather,
it was definitely more of a live joint, and I mean, he had live music there pretty much every single day, right up until the end. So, but it was still a bit of a surprise that it closed. But yeah, Listen is really nice. When you get down here, I'll take you there. And then the other new joint was one that. How would I describe this? So, Philip, you're familiar with the Asagaya neighborhood on the Chuo line, western part of Tokyo, right? So that's a classic alleyway neighborhood, just dozens and dozens of tiny little alleyways with hundreds of drinking dens. Well,
has that crazy blues bar, right?
Oh yeah, Chicago, Chicago.
Yeah, where the owner heads off to the south side of Chicago every year or something. I remember that story, right?
Oh yes, that's a fantastic bar. Yeah. But basically, on one of those kind of alleyways is a place called Jazz Tsune. And what's really curious is that, well, first of all, it's really small. It's a little square bar that can seat about 8 people max. Incredibly, he's got a little live space in the corner for a guitarist or a singer, maybe a sax player. It's only open from 12 to 6 on Saturdays. So I was like, okay, Asagai's a little far from where I live. I couldn't figure out this mystery, looking up online, even asking people. So I finally went up there, and so I walk in, and immediately I hear, James-san? And sitting at the bar is a real old pal of mine, Ida-san. I don't know if you're listening, Ida-san, but it was great to see you. Ida-san has been a Jazz Kisa customer for probably 45 plus years, he and his wife. And
amazing.
I hadn't seen him for a long time, and so it was great to sit down with him. So, of course, the owner, already I've got an intro to the guy. And he basically explains to me, he's like, well, this little corner bar here is run by a different person every night of the week, and he only has Saturday. So Saturday, it's Jazz Bar Tsune, where he brings his records down. He puts the sign outside, so the sign is only there on a Saturday. But the next night is a young woman who likes to play enka records. It's a Japanese country music, right? Wears a kimono. And on Monday night, it's just a guy who brings in whiskey and people who want to drink rare brands of whiskey. So it's like a communal
What a genius
bar.
idea, right? I mean, it's the dream, right? Like it's sort of a pop-up, but you don't have to really do much other than just turn up on it's like the perfect sweet spot between running a place and like going to a bar to DJ. Right, it's just in between there. That's amazing. What a brilliant idea!
You don't have to worry about covering all the rent because you're splitting it. You know you have your customers because you're only there one time a week, and it was just such a surprise. And I was just thinking to myself, you're probably going to see more and more of these things because looking at how expensive it is to actually open a shop in Japan, where you've got to look 6 months down payment, all that stuff.
What would you know about opening a shop, James?
You're jumping too far ahead.
There's one other place I was curious about because it's probably one of the weirdest places we've been, or not weird in the sense of what was there, but where it was located. And I think it's kind of got a third, if I'm not mistaken, a third reincarnation now. So if you have the book, you can have a look, but it's a place called Noise, very distinctive. It had this kind of red, almost like psychedelic kind of circular sign, but I think what was most notable about it was the fact that it was in like the third or fourth floor of a shopping mall, and it just felt so odd that there was a Jazz Kisa in there in that sort of clean kind of strip light environment.
Oh yeah, and right next to the station, the gigantic sort of suburban commuter hub of Machida Station, Southwest Tokyo. That Noise was, and what was really strange about Noise too was how big it was. I mean, it could fit about 60 people. It was a massive space, and they played the music really loud in there. They served lunch and coffee. It was open all day. So, I mean, I don't know how many random shoppers popped in. I guess they did get a lot of people coming in for just a coffee or lunch, but Noise was great. And, then about a year ago, I heard that they were closing. So I was, oh no, and I looked it up and then I saw, no, they're not closing. They're just moving. Machida, again, pretty far out in the suburbs, but I finally was able to go down there. And yes, it is version 3. Version 1 was open in Shimokitazawa, your old joint, back in the late 60s.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They moved from Shimokita in the early 80s, I think, to Machida. And now they've just moved a couple streets away, and it's a first floor space. It's still pretty large. They've got the piano there, so they still do the weekend live gigs. But Philip, you know how sometimes when you walk in and you just get a different kind of vibe immediately from the customers who are there. And it could be good or bad, but sometimes it's not always just that old guys smoking, listening to records, chatting, sort of Kisa vibe. Like sometimes you just get those different feelings. When I went into Noise on a Friday night at about 6:30, I just felt really, really strange because there was a group of 4 people who clearly just come from the office and were having one of those really awkward, when you're having work drinks with people who are not your friends, but you're trying to
love them.
A relaxed Friday night. Just excruciating. It's even worse in Japanese because they all have to speak so politely. Like I just couldn't get far away enough from these people, You
should have bowled in, give them some chat.
Well, then there was a real dandy looking old fella sitting there chain smoking and looked like he was translating a Japanese book into what was either Italian or Spanish by hand. I mean, okay, that's fine. Not the place I would think you'd want to go to translate stuff, but maybe the music relaxed him. And then an old gal sitting by herself with a newspaper, just downing bottle after bottle. She had, I think she was on her fourth bottle of Asahi by the time I left. So she definitely stuck out. But all these groups were completely separate. And then a guy sitting all the way in the back, wearing his headphones and seemingly watching a movie on his phone while in noise with the music blaring. So again, not a place I would go into when I wanted to watch something, but okay, maybe that was the only place.
At least he had his headphones on, because like if it was here, that same guy would have been sat at the table playing his watching a film on his phone on the loudspeaker of his phone, and it would have clashed with the music. So, be grateful for what you've got. I say, like, small mercies and all that. But yeah,
that's where in Japan, thankfully there's still a bit of appreciation for the
etiquette.
Neighbors, but it was a nice new look. It was a good joint. It was strange because they had moved. You would have thought they would have spiffied it up a little bit, but it kind of had the same exact feel as the old joint. A lot of things hanging from the walls. You said it was psychedelic. To me, the sign always looked a little more Art Deco, like a kind of thing you'd see in the 1930s, like the old Metropolis film. The movie. It kind of looked like that, but anyway, it was really, really nice. I dug it. I had my beer. I kind of just looked around at all these people, and then being Friday night in Machida, very exciting. A group, I don't know if they were on dates or not, but two young women and young guys came in, but clearly dug the music, because as I went to pay, I heard them talking about the record that was playing, and so again, that kind of made me really feel happy. It's like, oh, they're not just coming in to drink; they're actually jazz fans. And they couldn't have been, maybe mid-20s, late 20s at the most. So again, not your normal crowd, but a really cool place. And it was good to see that they're going to keep it going, because they're going to be passing, I think they'll be passing 55 years next year.
Wow, that's amazing. It's very cool. Again, to go back to the original question, I suppose, there are positive signs. Ultimately, right, just the sheer number that exists and the average age of the owners, you can't see, but it's certain you can't see any real increase in that way, but certainly, these kind of things and this renewed interest globally, and also then within Japan, at least we can hope that it will slow down that decline to some degree, and also they're going to evolve, right?
There's one more quick one, and that's even maybe more encouraging. Now, I've not gotten there yet, so it's going to have to wait for the new year. But it's a place called Ella and Lewis, which is an album I'm 100% certain that you have, yes. But what's really interesting is that I don't think she's the owner, but the person running it is a very young woman. I was told that she was only 23. So I'm not exactly sure of the ownership situation, because that would seem pretty young to be opening your own place. But obviously from the name and looking at the pictures of it, it's certainly, I don't want to say retro, but it's certainly going for that old school vibe. I think they do play a lot of swing and a lot of vocal music, and quite a lot of special coffee. So I'm quite interested to go.
Fingers crossed for 2024. It's been an incredible 2023 for Tokyo Jazz Joints, and in 2024, the book will continue. Someone called me up yesterday, called me on the other day about, I think I uttered the words about breaking America, and someone said, "All right, calm down, Beatles." But
I was going to say you can't break what's already broken, but that's our
that's true
podcast,
actually. Yeah. That's for our political podcast. But the book went to America. There's 500 pre-orders, and as soon as they arrived there, they were already gone. So and then obviously we've had this delay with the second edition in terms of getting it printed and getting it out there. So I feel like there's a lot bigger audience in America for the project. And, again, as you said, with Nick as well, who I've been in touch with too about photos, it's just amazing how you see gradually this kind of ecosystem emerging where all these things are connected. And, it's all involving people who have this love for this music, for this culture, and, for Japan. And, it's just a fantastic thing to be part of. And also what we want to say as the year-end podcast is thank you to all of you, because it blows my mind. Like every time I go onto SoundCloud and I look at the insights, it just amazes me that the range of listenership and geographically, the number of listens that we have. You know, even when you post the podcast on a Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, within like an hour, there's 100 odd listens, and that's just amazing. And we are genuinely, and I know we say this, but I think you can't really say it enough, to be honest, that we're so genuinely grateful for all your support, for all your enthusiasm, for all your encouragement. And, you know, even now we still see people, oh, just discovered this book, just found this podcast. We get these nice messages or posts on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. So thank you all for 2023. We hope that you'll stick with us in 2024. Yeah, it promises to be a really exciting year ahead.
It's going to be amazing, and counting down the days till you get here in February. We're working on a little map of places. There's still so many more. Philip, I can't believe it. I mean, people are going to be surprised at this, considering how long we've been doing the project. But you know, they also don't realize how big the Tokyo metro area is. I think my list is now up to 27 places in the Kanto area that we still need to visit. Now, some of those are really far out. You know, kind of like a Rindo type of
half-day trip.
Rindo, yeah. So it's not as if you can just like stop by after work, you know. So that's why. But even in the center part of town, there's a couple of places we haven't hit, or a couple of new ones. So super excited for that. And yeah, man, there's a lot to look forward to. I'm ready to get going.
All right. Well, listen, it's the 19th of December, so the holiday season is nearly upon us, and I hope you enjoy your Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'll be having the more traditional trimmings on the 25th. We'll, of course, be in touch. And in terms of listeners, look, we'll keep you in the loop. You know, make sure you check out at Tokyo Jazz Joints on Instagram, on X, on Facebook, but we're probably most active on Instagram.
Wow,
tell your friends.
Using X. Wow, that's impressive.
Well, I mean, it's more
up to date with the technology, Philip. It's always impressive.
I don't like this formerly known as Twitter, because I think anyone who's using it already knows, right? You know, as sad a loss as that is. So
I don't even say formally. And of course, most important, the 3+ hour 2-part year-end OK Jazz is, of course, now up online. I go through not all, because it's impossible, but I go through 33 tracks of some of my favorite new releases and reissues of the year. Philip, obviously, you've already listened to it twice, so you know how good it is, but that can be found in all the usual places as well, on iTunes, on SoundCloud, or directly at Tokyo Jazz site. So don't forget, OK Jazz year-end 2-parter, 3+ hours of me and great music. I mean, what's a better Christmas Eve when you're at home with the family and your loved ones?
I mean, Christmas is stressful enough without having to listen to that. But anyway, right, look, you have a good holiday season, whatever you do, and a happy new year and all that. We'll be in touch. And if you're listening still, thank you. Expect more from us in 2024, particularly after February. More stories to tell, more photos to share. And thank you all again. James, That's me.
Much
I'm
love.
out.
Okay.
See ya.
Peace. Take care, buddy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.